I had to get down to a single principle beyond all of his accomplishments, the extraordinary acts of kindness that are part of Special Olympics International and so many other things, Tim Shriver lives in my favorite space. And my favorite space is within the parentheses of a crazy idea. Everything that's ever happened that really matters happens within the parentheses of a crazy idea. And whether it's an entrepreneur starting a business, whether it's America thinking they can be an independent nation, whether it's a breakthrough in science or medicine, it all starts within the parentheses of somebody's crazy idea. And Tim lives in that space, and he's always thinking of what else can we do? What else is possible? And then he has this incredible ability to be a magnet, to bring people together. He's a gatherer as well, and gathers people in a most extraordinary way. So I'm going to invite all of you to step inside the parentheses of a crazy idea and our good friend, Tim Shriver. Oh, here, let me take this.
Thank you, Boyd. That's the kindest way I've ever been called crazy before. It's not easy to call somebody up and just call them crazy and still make it kind. But if there were a room, we talk about one kind act a day. What about one kind room a day? If there were a kind room everywhere, the master of ceremonies would be Boyd Matheson in every single one of them. Just being here for the last hour and a half, Boyd, I already feel this lift, this sense of possibility. I'm not on your wall of fame yet. I kept thinking the next thing he's going to say is he's putting Tim on the wall of fame. So I have something to aspire to, as we all do, to meet your level. And I want to join with everyone else here also in thanking Kaz. Thank you for your generosity in this space. Thank you for being a leader. We've met and talked, and we're, some part of this room is about building alliances, right? There are organizations represented, but there are also teams implied. There are ways in which we have to think about this work as shared work across many types of organizations, and I feel sort of privileged, Kaz, in your presence, obviously, in Taylor Randall's presence, to think about an entire university trying to marshal so many different faculties. You know how difficult university professors are to get to work together? They're the biggest prima donnas. Now that's a 4 on the Dignity Index. No, but Taylor has been such an extraordinary influence on me and Curtis. I'm grateful for your leadership of the foundation. I'm really excited to be in the room with Jessica Lowe and Grandpa Greg, and I was imagining Jessica inviting, is Jessica still here? I hope she's still here. I see Grandpa Greg is still here. I think if you taught Jessica to dance, I think it would be a good hit on your YouTube channel. And if you went and served at Jessica's Thursday morning thing, I just think there's cross-pollination in the world of people winning these awards that is so essential and is so evident in this room, and I'm very grateful to be a part of it. I'm a big fan of, Dr. Imam, you mentioned the Sufi tradition. I'm a big fan, as many people are, of the Sufi teacher Rumi, who writes, "Your acts of kindness are iridescent wings of divine love." Isn't that beautiful? Iridescent. Can you see that which is iridescent? I don't think so, right? It's almost glimmering, right? So imagine the people in this room with iridescent wings of divine love that we're trying to express in our own broken and fragile and incomplete and inadequate ways. Iridescent wings of divine love which linger and continue to uplift others long after you're sharing. That's the great Sufi poet and scholar and mystic Rumi. I want to share with you just a few minutes. I know we're supposed to stop. I'm not sure who the timekeeper is here, but we were originally supposed to stop at 1, so I'm going to go a little bit more quickly than the 45 to 55-minute, you'll be happy to know, speech that I had planned. But I want to share a little bit about my background in the Special Olympics movement, what I learned in that movement. Boyd mentioned it. One of my favorite stories from the Special Olympics movement took place. I was a volunteer and working for the World Games in Special Olympics, which we hope someday to have here in Utah. I know you guys are talking about the other Olympics, and people sometimes say to me, do you go to the real Olympics? And I used to say, well, sometimes I do, and I started to think about it after a while, and now I say, yeah, I go to the real Olympics. Yeah, I do. I go to the real Olympics. I don't want to be arrogant, but I think our athletes are the greatest athletes in the world. So, yeah, I go to the real Olympics. But one of my favorite scenes was the opening ceremonies were in New Haven, Connecticut in 1995, and down on the field we have about 6,000 people with intellectual challenges from about 135 countries. And they'd all been given single-use cameras. There's some people here old enough to remember. Anybody remember a camera? Yeah, okay. You don't have to raise your hand, but it's nice. Anyway, we used to get those yellow cameras, and we'd take them to the drugstore, and they'd give you your prints back, and you'd make sure you didn't waste any, all that stuff. Anyway, all the athletes have these cameras, and we were lucky enough that the President of the United States in '95, Bill Clinton, came to the games. But he was giving his speech, but they kept him at the top row of the stadium for security reasons. So, the field is like this, and people from all different countries, and one of the professional photographers, while the Clinton is speaking, sees a group of athletes over here, and they've all got their cameras to get pictures of the president at the top of the stadium, and he looks a little closer, and he sees like 10 or 12 of them. They all have the cameras backwards, and the viewfinder is pointing the wrong way, and the lens is on their nose, and he realizes they're wasting their film. They've never used a camera before. So he goes over and says, not knowing if they speak English, "Are you trying to get a picture of the president?" And the athlete sort of says, "Yeah." And he says, "Yeah, you have to turn the camera around, and then you push this button, that's how." And the athlete says, "Oh, thank you. But if you look through the viewfinder backwards, it works like binoculars, and you can see the president perfectly clearly at the top of the stadium." Now, I love that story in part because the photographer was a good guy. He wasn't unkind. He was actually generous and kind, volunteering his time, willing to come and give of his time. But he told the story with great humility and pride because he realized it had revealed that he was looking through a distorted lens. He looked at those athletes and he saw disability, developing country, non-American, and he assumed, perfectly kindly in a way, that they didn't know what they were doing. He didn't see the potential that they were creative, that they were entrepreneurial, that they had come up with a creative, unseen solution to a challenge that they were facing. And he told the story because he thought for the rest of his life he wanted to be the person who would not see through a distorted lens, who would try to see people more clearly. He wanted to be, in a way, free from the labeling, judging, assuming mind. And we heard, Taylor spoke about this, getting out of a different frame of mind. What I want to invite us to think about here today is kindness, not just as a value or an action, but as a way of seeing. How do we change our lens so that we don't see from the head, which is sorting, rich, poor, black, white, good, bad, nice, not nice, friend, foe, all these judgments that we're all making all the time. We see this in Special Olympics all the time. People judge books by their covers. And it leads to them to distort the capacity to see the person who's right in front of them. Sometimes we judge people that we know really well, right in our own homes, and we get them wrong. We assume this morning that you woke up, that the person in your house, your son, your daughter, your husband, your wife, your brother, your sister, and you assume that you know what they're feeling and thinking, and so many times we realize we got them wrong. The Special Olympics movement is, in a sense, one giant 50-plus year experiment with, yes, being kind to people with intellectual challenges, but also one giant experiment on whether or not the rest of us can see more clearly. Because when you get to the Special Olympics events, most people, many of you I'm sure have supported this movement at various times in your youth or maybe even more recently, most people will watch that race coming with a lens that is a little bit distorted. Who does this? I do. Because in the back of your mind, you see that 8-year-old line up to run 100 meters, right? And you see her standing at the starting line, and she has Down syndrome, and you're watching from the bleachers here. Maybe there's a few other people next to you, and it's a Saturday morning at such and such a high school, and you look at that 8-year-old, and in the back of your mind, somewhere is probably the thought that maybe when she was born, maybe her mother had a tough time. Maybe it was a tough day. And maybe in the back of your mind, you know that maybe she doesn't speak clearly. And maybe in the back of your mind, you know that schools are really tough places for her. And maybe you even know that she's probably never been invited to a birthday party. And she's standing at that starting line, ready to run 100 meters. And maybe she runs that race right in front of your eyes, and she turns around, maybe she comes in third, and her arms are up in the air. Maybe her mother's near you, and her mother's, yeah, it's my girl. And something in you starts to realize you had her wrong. That, what you just saw, that 100-meter dash, you saw a brave, heroic, brilliant human being, a child of God, someone more beautiful than you could have possibly dared imagine. And all those distortions start to slip away, even if it's just for a moment, and you start to see her as she is, not as you've distorted her in being. So this giant experiment is an experiment in kindness as an experience, not just as a call to action, but as a way of seeing each other, right? And this is, for many of us, a lifelong challenge. I want to invite us to think about this. Maybe we have many spiritual leaders in the room, which I'm very honored and happy to see, because sometimes we come to these conferences and, oh, no, we want to have this religion or that religion, and we're worried about how these things will be taken. We need all of you faith leaders in the room to bring the power of our faith traditions. And one thing, at least in my study, I've noticed is that when you consult our faith traditions and you ask them, how do you change your lens? If you were to ask Moses or Jesus, if you were to ask Muhammad, over and over again, the Buddha, you will hear an admonition, if you ask me, to drop down to your inner space, to get out of this way of seeing and try to see from this place of seeing. When you watch that 8-year-old run her race, you got to get out of here and into here. You've got to develop a practice almost. The Special Olympics movement is, in a sense, a practice in how to change your way of seeing. We have to find in each other and in ourselves a deeper point. Not a deeper point so that we will act with kindness, but rather so that we will see from a place of kindness. So that what we see is not an admonition to act nicely, but we will actually see the person in front of us who is so beautiful that you can't help it. That's what we're seeing in the award winners up here. It's not someone who was told they ought to feed people. It's not someone who was told they ought to be a grandpa who's kind to their grandchildren or who tells stories of beautiful intergenerational ideas, or a doctor who was told he should. These are human beings who remind us that it comes naturally when we find ourselves in a deeper place, in a place of inner wholeness. Now, my view on this is that this is not easy work. Sometimes kindness is painted as a little bit naive. Oh, just be kind, That's going to save the world. Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is not easy work. No, in my view, no good, serious spiritual work is done from the comfort zone. You got to get out of your comfort zone. We all have to get out of our comfort zone. We all have to do the spiritual work of figuring out how to get rid of the distortions. We saw the ads, I saw the ads yesterday that have just been cut, I don't know if they're out yet, that have been done on homelessness here. And the whole message of the ad, I think it's coming out now or in the next day or two, is to actually see people as my grandpa, as my cousin, as my brother, as my sister, not as the homeless man, but as your brother and your sister. Then you don't have to be told to be kind, because if your brother was outside and you didn't have anything to eat, it wouldn't take you long to go over to the table and grab a plate and take it out. You wouldn't have to be, please help your brother, he's hungry. Wouldn't even occur to you, right? So this work, I think, is being done so that we can act with kindness, not just because it's right, but because it's real. So you see up here the work our group is trying to do. My colleague Tammy Pfeiffer, Preston Brightwell, Megan Monroe are all here. Maybe ask you guys to stand because you have to do all the follow-up and all the executional work. Yeah, all the... So we looked at the culture, and we concluded a couple of years ago. I came from the Special Olympics movement. Other folks came from K-12 education. Some people were former Peace Corps volunteers. Some people were political activists. And we all came together, community organizers, doctors, speechwriters, governor advisors, and we all came together and we said, what is tearing us apart? And we concluded that our culture has normalized contempt. That the problem in the country isn't the border. The problem in the country, I'm just trying to think of what the other, isn't guns. The problem in the country isn't what we're teaching our children. The problem in the country isn't the marginal tax rate for capital gains. People fight about these things, and these are serious issues. They are serious issues, these issues that I've just named. But we have another issue, and the other issue is that we have normalized contempt as the way of treating each other when we disagree. The exact opposite of what we're about in this room has become not just a problem in human behavior, but a norm in our culture. Now that's when you got a problem. When the cultural norm actually rewards the most destructive behavior. So you see on the screen up here to my left and my right, in the left-hand side, in the column there, the dignity index has been introduced as a way of revealing how we treat each other when we disagree. It's not that we disagree, because my guess is there are very strong, very powerfully held views here, let's just say on the border. Controversial political issue. And I could split the room, and I don't know whether we'd have 60-40 or 70-30. We could all line up against each other and start firing salvos at each other about this version of the border or that version of what's wrong with the border. That's not our interest. Our interest is not whether we should build a wall or have open borders or something in between, which I think most people want. But our issue is when we have come to the point where we disagree on the border, how do we do it? How do you conduct your disagreement? This is the question we're asking. So we charted levels of contempt and levels of dignity in the way in which we speak to each other when we disagree. Now, you could imagine this language, or maybe just take a quick moment to look at it. From 4 down, you can't see me because I'm blocking 1. That's a good thing because 1 is terrible. 4 down is increasing levels of hatred and dehumanizing contempt. And 5 up is increasing levels of dignity and kindness. So I would just ask you, take a look at it, and maybe just, you could read these, they're just 1 sentence each, as I'm rambling on here. And as you've read them, you'll see that down at the bottom, the one I'm blocking is they're not even human, it's our duty to destroy them. That's a 1. That's the language of genocide. That's the language of murder. That's the language of violence. 2 is they're evil. 3 is we're good, they're bad. 4 is we're better than them. So as you go down that list, I'm going to suggest that when you think of, let's say you're a Democrat, there must be at least one in the room, right? Come on, raise your hand. Somebody, okay, no, I'm only kidding. I didn't want to out you. You can stay undercover. But if you're a Democrat, when you talk about those people, it's okay, Kaz. You're okay. You're accepted. But when you talk about it, so there are more Republicans than there are Democrats. When you watch Fox News tonight, if you do, it's not an accusation, it's just maybe a possibility. Where do you think you land when you talk to your husband or your wife or your best friend, or you go down to your civic organization and you're talking about Democrats or Republicans if you're a Democrat? Where do you think you land in this scale? We're the good people, they're the bad people? Is it those people are evil? They're out to destroy the country? It's us or them? Most people, when I ask this, if they're honest, answer, I'm about a 3. Some people will say, honestly, I'm a 2. Well, they don't necessarily own up to the idea, but they say that is the way I've spoken. In religion, you see this too, by the way. I believe in one of my Catholic brothers here. You see this in the LDS church. You've heard Russell Nelson talk about this issue of divisiveness in the community, the name calling that goes on within religious groups. Not, you think, well, religion is a countervailing force to hatred and contempt, right? No, sorry to say. Not so much. It's infected even religious disagreements. And then you get up to the 5, 6, 7, and 8, and you start to see increasing levels of dignity, not a compromise of your principle, right? Our goal here is not to make you compromise your principle. You really want to build a wall. Okay. But can you build a wall? Can you advocate building a wall? Can you disagree with people who don't want to build a wall with kindness? Can you do both? It's not actually that difficult. But we all have come to assume, because it's become culturally normative to disagree with so much hatred and contempt, that the way to advance the principle of building or not building a wall is to actually dehumanize the people that disagree with you. And guess what that produces? Absolutely nothing in terms of progress. We have an immigration, just to use that one example, I don't mean to dwell on it, we have an immigration issue that's been had federal inaction for almost 30 years. And I'm sorry to say, because I have many politicians in my family, and I love many and admire many, many political leaders, but I'm sorry to say the reason we have inaction on the border or on immigration is because both parties would prefer to run on it than solve it. That's not meant to be controversial, by the way. That's not meant to say that I'm indicting Republicans or Democrats. I'm just saying the political system has normalized 2 and 3 treatment of the other person. It's better for fundraising. It's better for clicks. It's better for elections. That's what people think. I better be full of hatred and contempt. And if you said to the average politician, why don't you join the movement to be kind? You know what they're going to say to you? They're going to say, I'm going to get killed if I do that. I can't do that. That's what they said it to me. They said it to Tammy. I'll lose. What do you want me to be, a loser? So we're really going into the teeth of a profound problem here. Just so you get a little sense of how this works, we'll just do a little quiz if I can bang this forward or not. Boom, boom. Point it. Okay. So this is an example. You have 2 quotes here. You don't have the index in front of you, so you're going to have to go from memory. This is a quiz. You're going to get to grade these on a scale of 1 to 8. The top 2 quotes are, well, the top quote is from a man named Leon Mugesera, who was a political leader at the very beginning of the Rwandan genocide. We the people are obliged to take responsibility ourselves to wipe out this scum. Anyone whose neck you do not cut is the one who will cut yours. The quote at the bottom, these are painful, by the way, and excuse me if these incite any traumatic reaction, is from Heinrich Himmler. Whether nations live in prosperity or starve to death interests me only insofar as we can make them slaves. So what do you think this is on a scale of 1 to 8? These are ones. These are ones. I am sorry to say, I could have put 5 ones up here from the last 3 months in the United States. And if I put them up there, what you might say is if you liked the candidate I put up there, you would say, oh, he was kidding. Or he didn't really mean it. He didn't really mean it when he said, if I became president, I would cut the necks of civil servants. He was just trying to make a point, right? No. Actually, that's a hateful comment. I don't care whether he was kidding or not. And I'm not picking on either side. Believe me, this is not a partisan effort at all, and both sides have more than enough room to grow and change on this. But this kind of rhetoric, when people use it, don't be surprised when people become racist, anti-Semitic, and violent. I mean, what do you expect? What do we expect? If we go home tonight and you say those Democrats are trying to destroy the country and how dare they, they're absolutely evil in the way they're conducting themselves, don't be surprised if when people hear you, some people will think this is a call to violence, because it is a call to violence. It's not a mystery. Here's a second. Oh, I'm going to try again. Oh, yeah. Okay, so that's a 1. They're not even human. Let's move on to the next one. Maybe it's easier if I just ask. There we go. So here. Kaz, will you read this one? Do you mind just reading this? This is from Archbishop Desmond Tutu, the great architect of the resistance in South Africa during the apartheid era, and the great architect of the movement, which they named Truth and Reconciliation, not truth and revenge, not truth and vindictiveness, not truth and retaliation, which unfortunately is what happens in many, many countries. Truth and reconciliation. This is, can you guess? This is not that hard, I hope. This is an 8. Each of us is born with inherent worth, so we treat everyone with dignity. You could substitute kindness. No matter what. Okay? The person who sees from kindness doesn't evaluate whether you deserve kindness. Ooh, she's been good to me today, I'll be kind. No. That's not the heart. That's not the way of looking we're trying to find. That's not the person who watched that race for that 8-year-old with Down syndrome and recognized she was beautiful. That person knows you treat people with dignity no matter what. You don't condone every behavior. You don't agree with every action. You don't not stop people who are oppressing or hurting others. You can stop them, but you treat them with dignity no matter what. If Desmond Tutu can do it after what he endured in his lifetime, what about the rest of us? So here's our little invitation. These are the skills we've distilled, and I'm not embarrassed to say we've distilled these skills largely from the work of K-12 teachers who help children learn how to disagree without being disagreeable. We've tried to translate the wisdom of 6th and 8th graders into the language of adults so that adults would actually start to recognize that what we teach children, we should actually practice. I did a focus group of kids in Iowa. We're talking about bullying, and I said to the kids, what about bullying in your school? And the kids said, one of the young women said, oh, it's actually pretty good now. Our school's gotten a lot better. I said, but don't some kids bully other kids? She said, well, not really. And I said, but it must happen sometimes. She said, you keep asking me about bullies in our school. She said, you're asking me the wrong question. If you want to find bullies, you should look at the adults. I mean, a third of the people in the United States Congress would get suspended from an American high school from the way they talk. I suspended kids in an American high school. I would suspend them if they were in an American high school for the way they talk. In the halls of Congress. And we all know it, but we just have come to see that that's normal. That's not normal. That's not normal. That's not acceptable. So anyway, here are the skills. You could take this, maybe, if it works for you, and adapt it for a kindness project. But what they're all trying to do, I want to go back to my first point, what they're all trying to do is help you drop out of your judgmental, fear-based, control-based, labeling mind and into your heart. So I'm in a discussion with you about the wisdom of the tax code. You think A, I think B. When I start to get excited, we would suggest you regulate. Take a deep breath. We can teach second graders to do this. It works. Count to 10. You become smarter and more wise in how you respond. If that doesn't work, try to adopt a posture of curiosity. Ask questions. Tell me more. Where did you learn this? Why is this so important to you? Who taught you? Where do you think the outcomes of your point of view are? You don't have to agree with anything, but curiosity creates a language. If you're doing that well, you're listening to hear, not to respond. I don't listen to your point of view in order to say, yeah, but you're wrong. You know, because so many times, maybe even right now, people are listening and they're going, yeah, but wait a minute, but wait a second, I'm not sure I agree with you. So we're always trying to get ready to retaliate, which means what? You never heard the person. You didn't hear them. You're just formulating an argument the whole time the other person's talking. And you're listening. He just used that data that I know is wrong. I'm going to nail him as soon as he draws breath. Right? So we recommend you learn to listen to hear, not to respond. And these ideas here are, in a sense, a curriculum for a culture change. You could change the language a little bit. But they're not admonitions to force you to do what's right, even if you don't want to. They're invitations to do, I would argue, almost the most difficult thing, change yourself. I just was writing this down when we were listening earlier. Another quote from Rumi. Yesterday, I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today, I am wise, so I am changing myself. Yesterday, maybe many of us walked into rooms like this thinking that if only we could change those people, if only we could change those idiots, those people that live in that world of whatever it is, we would save the country. I hope that by gathering us together here in this room and remembering the power of kindness, we will remember that the real wisdom is in changing ourselves so that we become people who look from the lens of kindness. Look from the lens of kindness and see it everywhere and remark and support and develop it wherever we can. I want to give you one last story, and I know I'm probably crazy over time. Yeah, I am. But I'll give you one last story. It was one of the most moving experiences of my life back in the Special Olympics movement. We had games, I mentioned 95, we had games in 2003 in Ireland, in Dublin, and we had a great opening ceremonies, and U2 sang, and Nelson Mandela came from South Africa and spoke about, to the athletes about being ambassadors of freedom, and Muhammad Ali was there, and celebrities, and it was fantastic. The Police Service of Northern Ireland, the PSNI, if you know that conflict, marched into that stadium with the Gardaí, with the police of the Republic of Ireland. First time they had ever appeared together. And the Police Service of Northern Ireland in Dublin, the hated Police Service of Northern Ireland, was cheered with a standing ovation when they came in with the Gardaí, with the Special Olympics Flame of Hope. A couple days later, I get a call from then President Mary Robinson's office, and she says, the President's office says, the President would like to come and watch some of the events. And I said, oh, fantastic. We have the track is brand new. We have these athletes that are going to, they're running the 100 in 12 seconds. You won't believe it. And she says, well, no, she wants to go to the motor activities. Motor activities is our event for people with the most severe disabilities. And I was thinking to myself, that's something for people that are really in it. The president comes, it's a photo op. I'd love to have her with, maybe if we go to the pool, brand new pool, they built it just for us. It was amazing. She said, no, the president's made up her mind. She'll meet you at 9:30 at motor activities. So I go to meet her, and I shake her hand, and we walk in, and we're in a room about twice this size. There's about 1,000 people packed. The Irish I'm a little bit biased, but these are some kind of beautiful people. 1,000 people in there to watch our athletes do motor activities. So they wheel out the first participant. His coach wheels him out. It's a woman, and she puts his wheelchair it's a riser just about this size, and I'm sitting right where you are. The president's sitting next to me, and it's crowded. And the coach kind of walks back like this and sort of stands at a distance. And in front of Donal Page is a tray, and on one side is a beanbag, and his event is to lift the beanbag from here and to put it over here. And I learned a little bit about him. He had a very severe illness as a 2-year-old, and he was given the last rites of the church, I think 4 times. They thought, but his parents, he survived, and his mother is a stay-at-home mom, 7 children. His dad is a dairy farmer, worked with cows, not a big industrial farmer. He milks cows. And they kept him at home and raised little Donal, with his brothers and sisters. But he lost all of his physical control, and he lost his speech, and he lost a lot of his capacity to his cognitive skills. So the announcer says, "This is the beanbag lift, Donal Page," and he says, "Off you go." And there's sort of an informal timer. And Donal sort of sits there and sort of takes in the room, and you can see him. He's in his chair, and he's got some braces on, and he sort of looks around the room, and I'm sitting next to the president. I'm thinking, hope he. And he kind of looks around, and then you can see at like about 30 seconds, which is a long 30 seconds with nothing happening, he decides he's going to pick up this beanbag, and you can see him move his shoulder, and his arm's not going. It's just not going to get there. And he's pushing, and he's trying to move it like this, and he just can't get there. Well, anyway, there's a sort of a deathly silence in the room. And we're all watching. At the 3-minute mark, the hand falls on the bag. And I talked to his dad later, and he said, I was always taking Donal to the doctors, And the doctors would always say, well, Donal can't do this. And I would always say to the doctor, I just give him a bit of time. If you just give Donal a bit of time, he can do more than you think. At the 3-minute mark, he gets his hand on that beanbag. And he just slowly picks it up. And he moves that bag. And by the time he gets about halfway, sorry, I'm getting emotional, the place starts cheering. Everybody's like, yeah. Anyway, long story short, Donal Page drops that bag on the other side of the tray at the 18-minute mark. And at this point, this entire room is screaming and yelling and cheering like it's the Final Four. And I'm cheering, I'm standing there, tears are pouring down. I look over at the president, tears are pouring down her face. And part of what's going through my head is how wrong I had it. Like, I was worried that she wouldn't be able to see it. I was thinking, maybe it would have been better if she could have seen someone fast. That's what I'd gone in there with. That's what I mean. My lens was so distorted. And this young man did his act of kindness not from us. We didn't do it for him. He was the brave one. He showed up. He took a chance. He drove across the country. He couldn't, if I had been in his condition, please, no, I'm embarrassed. Not him. He was strong enough, smart enough, brave enough, and kind enough to trust all of us that we could see how beautiful and how magically wonderful he is. that comes at our service. It's out there for us. The invitation to see with that lens is to be able to see kindness everywhere, to see the capacity we have not just to act on it, but to live from it. I learned it from the Special Olympics movement. We're crazy enough to think these same lessons should and can be applied to our country, to our politics. Why not? Why not ask? Boyd thinks we're a little crazy, and I'm happy and proud to be in a room of equally crazy people. Thank you very much.